Hello, I want to welcome you to the Power of Our Story. My name is Sarah Carell. I'm the founder of the Power of Our Story. We are a community where veterans, first responders, and all protectors can connect, share their experiences, and heal together. So today, I am so thrilled to welcome our guest, Scott McPherson. Scott served with the 1st Battalion, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment during the liberation of Kuwait, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. He's currently a firefighter EMT in Tennessee, and he's the National Program Coordinator and Course Leader for First Responder Reboot. And I think the reason why it means so much to me to have Scott with us today is because I know the great work that you all are doing with Reboot. And I know that you are somebody who loves learning about the power of storytelling. So there's a lot in common there. So, Scott, I just want to welcome you on today. Thank you so much.
Sarah, great to see you. Thanks so much for the time and the opportunity to be here. Yes, just as you said, I initially connected with the power of our story just because storytelling is just so important to the work that we do. And so common hearts there, and really I just appreciate the opportunity to come on and perhaps talk a little bit further about why storytelling is so powerful, especially when it comes to trauma recovery. And I think as we go through here tonight, you'll hear a little bit more about how storytelling plays a role in the courses that we run and in the work that we do in supporting military veterans as well as first responders in the recovery process from their service experiences. I think we have to ask this question. Why is storytelling such a powerful experience as part of just the human experience? If you think back through human history, storytelling has been a large part of the way that people communicate amongst themselves, especially with the history of a people or a culture. I mean, how many thousands of years have people been gathering around a campfire at night and sharing stories of their people, of themselves? It just seems to be kind of wired into our DNA. And if you think about a message that you heard, or a lecture that you went to, or a sermon, I mean, what are the things that you remember from that? Is it what somebody said, or is it the stories that they told? And so often, if you're anything like me, it's the stories that are what really stick with us and that connect with us. And so there is something just intrinsically very powerful about storytelling. And I think in our time here today, maybe we'll get a little bit better picture of how storytelling plays a role in trauma recovery. So to get us going on that, just want to give a little bit of background on the program that we work with. I do work with First Responder Reboot, which is a trauma recovery course. It's a peer-led approach to helping first responders and their spouses overcome service-related trauma. But this whole approach started with one focused on combat veterans and their spouses and their needs in the return home from war and looking at the combat experience. And in that context, what we realized is that many people were really struggling with really soul wounds of their service experiences, and they needed a place to be able to wrestle with some of those questions. And really, we found that the same exact thing exists within the first responder world. That, every time that we're called, we're going into the worst days of other people's lives. And we're going to see a lot of tragedy. We're going to see the big emotions of other people experiencing those things. We're going to be in places where we're helpless to save someone. And so those are also really kind of soul level questions that people need a place to be able to wrestle with. So what we do is we equip peer leaders, people with their own lived experience, either current responders, former responders, law enforcement, fire service, emergency medicine, dispatch, corrections, people, who've been there and who have done that. We train them to be able to lead a set of guided conversations for the responders of their community. And as I mentioned, spouses are invited into the conversation because so often they've got their own experiences with how the career has impacted them. And so these leaders are guiding them through a set of conversations based in science and scripture that help them to really get at some of the root causes of the trauma experiences that they've had and the symptoms that it's produced in their lives. And a large part of what we're doing there is giving them an opportunity to share with a group of other people who get it some of their story and their experiences. And then there's a whole week that we have toward the end of the course, which is called Share Your Story Week. And that's really where people have an opportunity where they can talk, they can share what they've been through with a group of other people that they've developed trust in, that they've had an opportunity to grow to know and to feel like they can take the defenses down, they can take the walls down, and just be able to share what's been on their heart. So yeah, this is something that we've got a lot of experience with is storytelling, and I think one of the things that I've just found so cool about Wounds to Wisdom as well as the power of your story is that's the same thing that you guys are doing, Sarah, is giving people that opportunity that they so desperately need. So why do we do this? And that's a fair question because really what we're talking about is people going back into some of the darkest days of their lives and sharing that with other people. And it seems like it would be a whole lot easier to just try to forget about the past, to not have it be something that we're bringing back up again, and certainly not bringing it into a place where we're sharing it with other people. It feels a lot safer to just kind of keep it bottled up inside. And, ultimately, when we're going through traumatic experiences, that's often what people most want to do is put it behind them. We kind of take these experiences, we try to stuff them in a box somewhere down deep, and then hope that they're never going to come back out again. But the reality is that they do. That's really not the way that God built us. And so, unfortunately, those experiences, especially when they compound and there's multiple things shoved in that box, eventually the box starts to leak, or it can just bust wide open and create all sorts of havoc in our lives. So what we have found is that it's important to go in and unpack the box periodically. Best if it's done kind of continually, but for many people, they reach that point where they're seeing the impact on their lives, and now they've got to go in and really do some work to unpack some of the box, so that they kind of establishing more stability in their lives. So to get a sense as to why this is so important, I wanted to talk a little bit about normal memories versus traumatic memories, because they're very different in terms of the way that our mind processes some of this. And I'm going to try not to get too nerdy and wonky on some of this, but forgive me if I get a little bit down deep in the weeds, because I think it's really important. So, let's talk about a normal memory, something like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This is pretty standard stuff, so things that we do every day. But as we're doing these things, our mind is creating a narrative of what's going on. We get the bread, we get the peanut butter, we get the jelly, we get the knife out of the jar, put one on one side, put one on the other side, put it together, and there's lunch, right? And so there's kind of a normal set of memories that our minds process to better equip us to do these everyday tasks and not have to like think about them like they're brand new every single time. And so our mind is constructing, like I said, kind of a narrative, a set of words that it's stringing together that make up that memory. And so the next time we're going to go to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it knows exactly what we need to do. And it just brings down that list and we don't even think about it. We just kind of execute, make our sandwich and have our lunch. So, basically what's happening is that each one of those steps in the process is getting assigned into a file folder in our mind. Obviously, it doesn't look like that inside the brain, but it's kind of think about it as like a file folder of these memories. And easy things like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like that is pretty easy for our mind to handle, and it gets everything into the right file folder so it's able to access it easier next time. So far, so good? All right, I'll keep
Excellent.
rolling.
Yes, keep going.
All right. So trauma memories are different. These are the big experiences in life where either our life is at risk, somebody else's life is at risk. One of those situations where it's a big event. And you think about combat veterans and their experiences. There's a lot of boredom that goes on in combat, but then there are those really big moments where life and death is happening all around you. And that's going to be one of these types of critical incidents. First responders have the same thing. The tones drop, they roll out the door, they never know what they're going into, and it may very well be one that puts either their life at risk or has them in a position where somebody else's life depends on them and how they perform. And that can happen multiple times on a shift. You hear things like a civilian may encounter one of these kind of life and death situations, maybe two or three times in a lifetime. First responders may have that on a shift, and they may encounter hundreds or even over 1,000 of these critical incidents over a career. And so you can see that all of that can easily stack up on us if we're not deliberate in the way that we approach these things because these big events have so much sensory involvement. There's so much emotional content going on in a time and a place where we're not built to process it in that moment. We can't feel when we're on a scene doing cardiac care on a patient or trying to rescue somebody out of an entrapment in a motor vehicle accident or trying to make a grab and rescue somebody out of a fire. You can't feel in that moment. You've just got to function. But that doesn't mean that sensory impact isn't there. It doesn't mean that the emotional impact isn't there. It just kind of gets stored in a separate place in our mind so that we're able to process it later. But unfortunately, because there is so much of this, those memories tend to not get processed smoothly. They don't end up in the right file folder all the time. Sometimes they get balled up in a big mash and they just get crammed in somewhere. Or there may be half in one file folder and half in another. Or it may just be incomplete pieces. The paper gets ripped in two, one part gets in one file folder, one part gets in another. And so, in the aftermath of trauma experiences like these, yeah, we can go through a process where the mind is trying to sort these things out. We're safe now, we're out of that moment, and now the mind is trying to put all the pieces together on something like this. And for many of us, we experience that as what's called re-experiencing, where you can feel like you're right back there in the middle of that scene. The mind is creating that image in your mind, either while you're awake or potentially while you're asleep. Or it just can be intrusive thoughts where that scene just replays or aspects of it replay in your mind again and again and again. That's all the mind trying to sort out the things that it's been through and put all of this massive amount of content into the right file folders. So, like I said, with the normal memories, the mind works in terms of words. And so many of these experiences defy words. They're almost beyond description. But our mind is, again, trying to process them in terms of words. So when we do our story, when we tell our story, What we're in effect doing is helping the mind to put the experiences into the words that it needs to process them. And so this, I think, is the key reason why storytelling is such an important part of so many different types of trauma recovery for so many different kinds of people. It is because what we're effectively doing is helping the mind do what it's trying to do on its own and maybe need some help. So I don't want to go too fast. Is that so far so good? Or any questions?
It's
Or do you want me
actually
to keep rolling?
fascinating. Yeah, no, thank you. That's really interesting. I've never heard quite that angle, have it articulated that way, which was really interesting. The importance of being able to articulate it with words, and that helps with the whole processing. And yeah, that's thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Keep going if you have more to share.
Yeah, yeah, I sure will. All right. So when we get to helping people to share their story, so these are our military veterans, these are first responders, these are people who have been through all sorts of different kinds of traumatic experiences in life. We want to help them get by giving them an opportunity to share their story. Now, this happens at the end of our courses, so people have had a time to develop trust in each other. And that's a really important aspect that this is not something that you do with just anybody. You've really got to develop trust so that you feel like you can safely unpack the box as you need to. But it starts off with a written component where we give people an opportunity to write out their story. And again, it's putting it into words. So it's a big part of the journey to be able to write out what somebody has been through. So oftentimes what we do is have what we call a trauma timeline that people assemble as they go through the course where they take specific aspects. And what we're encouraging them to do is not only put down the who, why, what, where, the facts, the chronology of things that happened, but then begin to put together with that the emotional components that they may not have really ever processed before. You've got in the human brain a left side and a right side. The left side tends to be more analytical and chronological, and then the right side tends to be more spatial. This is kind of where music and art reside. And also a lot of emotional components are stored on the right side. And there's only one place in the brain where these two sides connect. And it tends to be difficult for information to pass in between these two sides. And so what we're looking to do is give people an opportunity to help their own brain process the things that they've been through and to connect the left and the right side. So we're encouraging them not only to put down the what happened, where it happened, when it happened, but then also what are some of the emotions that went along with those events. And this is a really fascinating part that I don't claim to understand, but I'm going to give it to you anyway because I think it's really cool. And that is that we encourage people to handwrite their story. Now, there is something, we don't do a lot of handwriting these days. Everything's either text or typing, right? But there is something about handwriting that helps the two hemispheres of the brain communicate. And again, I don't understand this. You'll have to get some, brain scientists on here, neuroscientists to be able to explain this to you. But I've witnessed the power of this myself, and it is amazing to see what happens with this. It's something akin to when they do, if you've heard of EMDR, and there's kind of the two sides of the brain that are encouraged to communicate with each other by the side-to-side movement of the eyes following a light or the sounds that some people use. There's something similar that's going on here when people handwrite. There's the two hemispheres of the brain are communicating, or it just helps them communicate about some of these things and put the experiences into words. So we encourage our people to go through a time period of kind of writing their story. For some folks, they may do like an autobiography where they're just kind of writing out what they've been through in life in total. Others will focus just on certain traumatic experiences that they've been through and really just be able to write about those if that's what they need to do. So they go through this process, and then we have a time where we get together, and people have an opportunity to share any aspects of their story that they want to with the group. And again, they're verbalizing now some of the things that they've written down, and once again, putting them into words. And there is something about sharing our story with other people that brings some of the darkness into the light. It brings things out of us and shares them with other people. We talk about pain shared is pain divided. And there's something to that as we go through this process, our story and some of the difficult aspects of it tends to have less power over our lives today. Doesn't change anything about what's happened, obviously, but the power that those things can have over us tends to get lessened the more times that we bring our story forward and that we share it with other people. So I will say, just as kind of a note of caution, this is not something that I would, especially for people who have been through a lot of traumatic experiences or some very deep traumatic experiences, not something that you want to do on your own. You do want to do this in community with other people who can be there to support you in the tough moments. It's something to do with a counselor, perhaps, or a therapist under their guidance. But it is pretty emotionally powerful when you go through this, and it also can be a big part of a lot of people's healing journey. So that was a lot. I don't know if any questions, thoughts, comments come out of all that.
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. And it always gets me excited to hear more about the healing power of storytelling. Obviously I believe in it because the power of our story, I've seen it too on this platform. Just what will happen when we have our protectors trust and they feel safe and they start releasing their stories little by little and the community grows together. They realize they're not alone. It seems so simple and yet so powerful. And I just really love how you broke it down. I'm excited again about what Reboot is doing and how you say it's faith-based scriptural with science. You have the science behind it. Um, so I am curious. There's a lot of things that I'd love to ask you about. Your program, then, can you break it down into logistics? Like if somebody calls, say, hey, listen, I'd love to join a group. What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So reboot courses are held really, we're in all across the US, many communities, 16 different countries. We've got courses that are going on in person in a lot of communities. We've got courses that are going on online. So really anybody can join in from anywhere. And there are military specific courses. There are first responder specific courses, and then there's a general trauma course called Trauma Reboot that's really for anybody, no matter what they've been through. So anybody who wants more information on those, it's rebootrecovery.com. And that's going to be the platform to get access to all three of the courses. If you want the specifically military course, it's rebootrecovery.com/military. And for the first responder course, rebootrecovery.com/responders. And there's general information about each one of the courses, some testimonial videos from graduates. And that's also where people can go to register for a course. So there's a listing under there of all the available courses that are getting ready to start up. It changes all the time because we have trained leaders really all over the world, all over North America and the U.S. in particular, who are launching courses. They're all volunteers. So they're kind of launching courses as they have the ability to do so. But that's the easiest way to find a course that somebody can plug into. And if there isn't one near you, there's a wait list for a virtual course. And so the next time a virtual course starts up, that is, possible based on time zones, things like that, that somebody might want to be able to register for, then the course leaders will reach out and they'll invite that person to see if that time works for them. And if so, they can join a course that way.
Okay, fantastic. And that will all be in the description. So if you didn't catch that, it will be there, right on the channel. So you have, I'm imagining, is this ongoing or is it cohorts, like 8-week cohorts, or what does that look like?
Yeah, each course is 12 weeks long. So
12
each
weeks.
week is a conversation, and there's 12 of them altogether that constitute the course itself. They don't launch on any set schedule. It's really based on our leader team's decision as to when to launch a course. And so they change really all the time in terms of when they're starting up. And that all can be found on each one of the websites. And then just wanted to mention, Sarah, that we are always looking for people who have a heart for this kind of ministry work and want to create an environment where people who are hurting and are on their own can create this kind of a space for people to be able to unpack the box, to share some of their story. So that's a kind of a separate process to get started as a reboot course leader. But would love to talk to anybody who has an interest in learning more about that. These are peer-led courses. So for the military course, people who have are either currently or serving in the military, one of the armed services, or are former or are veterans. That we love to communicate with folks, and then also in the first responder world, any current or former responder coming from a law enforcement, fire service, emergency medicine, dispatch, corrections. Would love to talk to them about how we equip leaders to be able to do this kind of work in their communities.
That's fantastic because so many are looking for a purpose to help their brothers and sisters in arms. I think that's just a wonderful opportunity. And again, they can see your track record of how it is helping people really recover from the hardest things that are so suppressed normally. One thing that I was hearing too is that somebody who does debriefs for law enforcement said that what is really hard to see is instead of people unpacking and debriefing as things come up, which you had talked about earlier, it's usually maybe right before retirement or they don't even do it. And she's saying just the whole mind, body, soul, and spirit. It's like everything comes up at the same time, like the cancers, the many physical diseases, and then also all the trauma comes up, and then they tend to not be connected anymore to their brothers and sisters and in their agencies. So and I was just reading too, like for law enforcement, I don't know what it is for all first responders, but law enforcement, the average lifespan is 57.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is something we need to pay attention to. So, yeah.
And I'm convinced, Sarah, that there a lot of the reason for that, for the physical ailments that people experience, is because of unprocessed trauma, of grief reactions that haven't been fully expressed or appreciated or processed. Just harboring all of these things and keeping them all inside is what's making us sick.
Yeah.
And so having a place for people to go really from the beginning of their career. So they're not waiting until they're in retirement or just about ready to retire. And now you're trying to unpack a 20, 25-year box full of experiences. It's so much better if you're doing it as you go along. And so yeah, that's ultimately what we hope to create is communities all over the US, Canada, across the world, really, where people can do that work as they go along. But for folks who are nearing the end of their career or in retirement, we have so many of our courses that have lots of retirees either as participants, and then so many of them go on to lead courses, as you said, as a way to have purpose that comes from pain. and to be able to pour into another generation and to really remain part of the community in very meaningful ways. And I love to see that happen.
Love that. Love it. So, we talk about this a lot on this platform that we wish, a lot of our first responders and veterans wish that they understood all the mental health part when they were in the academy or they were in boot camp. And so that's not exactly happening right now. So did I hear you say that this is something that people can come, like when they go through the academy, they can actually start the process of educating themselves on how to protect themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, that they could just start out at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, any responder is welcome, whether they've, got 3 months or 30 years in service. They're welcome to participate in a course. So yes, absolutely. I would think it would be a much better way to approach handling the stresses that are inevitable as part of the career from intentionality and with a set of tools and resources that have been proven to be effective rather than doing what so many of us do, which is try to handle it on our own and to try to be kind of a lone ranger. And that tends to lead us into places of isolation and where a lot of kind of negative of ways of handling trauma is kind of what we tend to turn to, many different painkillers that ultimately aren't effective and lead to all sorts of havoc in our lives.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So what I'm hearing also too is wouldn't it be amazing if leadership came and went through these programs so that they could be very aware in how to support their people and their agencies in the best way?
And what I would love to see happen, Sarah, is to have courses specific for leaders. Have courses for chiefs, have courses for assistant chiefs, ones where they may or may not be willing to get into a group with other people who are maybe new in the career and have the same level of vulnerability that
Yeah.
they would if it was with a peer group.
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing I think has got a lot of potential to it. And really all we need is some chiefs who are willing to step forward and say, "Yep, I'll do that work," and we'll help them get it started.
Okay, I'm going to chew on that one and I'm going to get back to you. I love that possibility. I am definitely going to circle back to you on that. I'm going to reach out to some people. I'd love to see that happen. Yeah, the more that I hear the statistics, the more that I hear the stories from those who are retired, it just seems like the patterns and the gaps are so clear. And if people understood, like they said, if I knew what I knew now, of course, back then I would know how I could have protected myself more in this way. You know what I'm curious about? Can you talk more about the soul injuries, the soul wound? You talked about soul wound. How would you describe that?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of what we do focus on. When you're experiencing things, I'm just going to focus on the first responder world, but really a lot of this came from initial understanding of the military experience. And really where Reboot started was in working with combat veterans and realizing that, the military's approach to looking at post-traumatic stress and combat trauma was approaching it from the perspective of a wound of the mind. Which, that there's a lot of absolutely very valid concerns there and things that need to be addressed. But what we found is that a lot of these combat veterans were really dealing not only with that, but also with a wound of the soul. They had seen the brokenness of the world firsthand in a war zone. They had been in places where they had been helpless to save someone. They had seen the realities and the fine line between life and death. And all of these kind of experiences were ones where it really needed an approach that focused more at a soul level to be able to help them truly heal. And the component of kind of incorporating this kind of soul level conversation into what they were already doing from a post-traumatic stress ended up being a component that was really needed. And for many combat veterans, this combination is something that really helped them move forward. And so this is kind of where we started. It was in that realm, but we realized that while the first responder experience is not the same, there are a lot of parallels in that we are seeing the brokenness of the world. We are being put in every time we're called, we're potentially going into places where you really do see a lot of ugliness and a lot of brokenness and a lot of tragedy and the big emotions that go along with that from other people. We're fixers, right? We expect we're gonna fix every situation that we're called into. And people call us because they've got a big problem and they want a solution and they want somebody to fix it. So they call us and they expect us, we're going to be able to come and we're going to be able to fix whatever the problem is. The reality is there's a lot of these situations we cannot fix.
Mm.
But it leaves us in a place then of having to assign blame somewhere. There's got to be a reason why we weren't able to fix the problem. And too often we end up either blaming ourselves, we blame somebody else on our team who may or may not have any real responsibility in the outcome of that situation, or we end up blaming God. And ultimately, none of those is going to end up in a positive outcome. And that leads, when we internalize that blame, that tends to lead to shame. And, guilt is one thing. Guilt says that I did something wrong. And we can begin to incorporate these narratives that of what if. What if I had done this before that? What if I had gotten there 5 seconds sooner? What if I had a different level of training? I could have done something different. I could have had a different outcome to that event. And so we end up in these what ifs, incorporating a narrative of false guilt that can then become serious baggage weighing on our lives. And where it tends to move is from false guilt to shame. And guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. I am unlovable. I am irredeemable. I am beyond repair. And that kind of a state of shame is one where many people turn to alcohol, to drugs, to other kind of painkillers. And ultimately, it can also lead us to a place where we begin to feel like things can't get any better. And that tends to lead people to start to consider suicide. So it's so important that we really get at these soul level wounds to be able to help somebody truly heal and move forward from what they've been through.
Gosh, Scott, so beautifully shared. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just, the stories that we can tell ourselves, you're right, if it's through guilt and then shame, it's that hopelessness, that last stop of hopelessness. And it's exciting to know how much you're intervening on so many levels with what you're doing. And yeah, the soul wound, boy, you see that all the time. And that's only with the people that have the courage to heal, and you think about all the ones that are suffering in silence. That always haunts me. So I really appreciate so much everything that you're sharing and you're teaching in this conversation. Now, I'm curious too, because um, there are a lot of people that may not have a faith in God. I know this is a faith-based organization. What does that look like for people who are interested in this kind of healing, but may have a different faith or may be agnostic or atheist? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, we welcome anybody from any faith background, no faith background to come into a reboot course. And we have many people coming who faith is not part of their lived experience to that point. And we welcome them and we want them there. We tell them what they're going to hear, and we tell them that this is the subjects we're going to cover and the perspective that we're going to bring. We're not there to convert somebody. We're not there to beat them over the head or to get them to believe what we believe. But we do want to show them how some of these tools and resources speak into their lived experiences. And a lot of what we find in Scripture speaks right into some of these topics of forgiveness, forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others, talking about true guilt versus false guilt, talking about processing grief and loss in healthy ways, finding purpose in pain, identity. So many of these topics that we cover, the Scripture naturally flows into and speaks into these needs. So, we tell folks that we're going to be praying, we're going to be speaking about God, we're going to be talking about what Scripture says, but, you take from this what's valuable for your own healing journey. And we have many people successfully complete the course coming from all sorts of different faith backgrounds. And I think that they've gotten a lot out of it. We do a survey just to folks have an opportunity to tell us what their experience was like. And I think we're at 96% said that they felt that their faith was respected in the course. And we have people coming from, all sorts of different, even within a Christian perspective, different from Catholic to different kind of Protestant denominations, all sorts of different kind of perspectives. And the course is constructed in a way to try to make everybody feel comfortable and that it's approachable for them.
Love that. It just reinforces the idea that love and truth is the universal language that everybody can connect to. Even if we have, our belief in Christ, it's yeah, that healing language of the love and truth that heals. That universal love and truth. Again, I love what you all are doing. Do you have any favorite stories that have come out of these groups?
I really can't share anything like that, Sarah. We put a high premium on confidentiality.
Okay.
And it's a hallmark of what we do that this has to be a place where people can feel safe, that their story is respected and honored. And one of the ways that we honor that is by keeping their story confidential.
Oh,
So I've got a ton of them, but I really can't share any of them out of respect for the people who shared them with me.
sure. Okay, very good. I definitely respect that. And you're not even going close to breaking confidentiality. So that's yeah, I totally respect that. Well, let me ask you something. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with? Any more stories or thoughts before we turn off the recording?
Yeah, I do actually have a couple of additional resources that are not part of Reboot, but ones that I've personally found to be very valuable. And so, if anybody wants to dig deeper into this topic, then just things that they can reference on their own. So, I had a couple of kind of favorites that I'll share with everybody. I don't know. Hopefully, it'll show up on the screen. I don't know if it will or not, but a couple of books. The first one is called Voice of the Heart, and this is by Dr. Chip Dodd. And as I mentioned, I'm kind of a left brain kind of guy. I work in the analytical side of things. And really, this book helped me to understand for the first time the importance of emotions and how all emotions, even the ones that we might label as being negative, were all created by God for a reason. And they can either be a benefit or they can be toxic in our life, depending on what we do with them.
Hmm.
And so this book, I won't spoil it for you if you want to go get the book, but that book it really opened my eyes to a lot of realities and something I'd encourage anybody to check out. The next one is called Anatomy of the Soul. This is by Dr. Kurt Thompson. He is a neuroscientist and a therapist who really studies the connections between neuroscience and what we know from a scientific perspective with theology and how God's word speaks about our lives and healing from various different types of traumatic experiences. And a lot of what I learned about storytelling and the reason to do an autobiography comes from this book. So I really encourage anybody to check that out. It's not it's from a neuroscientist, so it's deep, but it's still approachable and readable. So yeah, check that one out if you want to. And if you really want to nerd out on the physiology side of all of this, There's a book by Dr. What's his name? Bessel van de Kolk
Yeah.
called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
And this is one that is used quite a bit. It's really, really good. I've got all sorts of things dog-eared and underlined in here. It's pretty deep, but it will take you into how the body responds to trauma and the effects that it has on the mind and the body. And one that I think, for anybody who's interested in this topic and is willing to dive a little bit deeper, there's a lot of great material in there.
That is fantastic. I'll put all three of those books in the description also for anybody who wants to order those too. Scott, this was such a great conversation. I'm really excited that to help get your voice out there, just to hear what you're doing with Reboot and the power of storytelling. It's so needed. The more I think we've talked about that, I'm in school now for crisis response and interventions and trauma. And I just see the need for exactly what you're doing so much. So thank you for doing all that you're doing. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, Sarah, thank you for the opportunity to be here and just keep doing what you're doing. It's so important, and you're giving people a voice that otherwise would be voiceless, and that's huge. I love being part of this community and being just one member of a much bigger movement that's going on. But that starts with leadership, and I appreciate you and what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.